Queen Camilla walked quickly through the long hallway of Buckingham Palace. Her high heels clicked on the marble floor as she checked her watch. It was almost midnight and the palace was quiet except for the sound of her footsteps. She carried a small leather bag in her hand, holding it tight against her body. The Queen had been planning this moment for weeks. Ever since she discovered the hidden documents in the old safe behind the painting in her private study, she knew she had to act fast. These papers contained information that could change everything about the royal family's fortune, information that nobody else knew about. She reached the door to the private library on the third floor. This room was rarely used by anyone except herself, making it the perfect place for secret meetings. Camilla looked around to make sure no guards were watching, then used her special key to unlock the door. The heavy wooden door opened with a soft creak. Inside the library, tall bookshelves reached from floor to ceiling. Moonlight came through the large windows, creating shadows across the room. Camilla didn't turn on the main lights. Instead, she used a small lamp on the reading table. The warm light made the room feel cozy but also mysterious. She sat down in the leather chair and opened the bag. Inside were documents, photographs, and a small metal box. These items represented a secret that had been hidden for over 50 years. A secret about money, land, and valuable items that belonged to the royal family, but had somehow disappeared from all official records. The Queen spread the papers on the table and began reading them again. Her grandmother had written some of these documents in her own handwriting. They told a story about a hidden inheritance that was meant to be passed down through the royal family. But somewhere along the way, this inheritance had been stolen or hidden by someone the family trusted. Camilla had spent months trying to understand what happened. She hired a private investigator to help her find the truth. Tonight, she was meeting with him to get the final pieces of the puzzle. She needed to know who took the inheritance and where it was now. The clock on the wall showed 5 minutes past midnight when she heard a soft knock on the door. 3 quick knocks, then 2 slow ones. This was the secret signal she had arranged with the investigator. Camilla got up and walked to the door, but she didn't open it right away. She listened carefully for any other sounds in the hallway. The palace had security cameras and guards who walked around at night. If anyone saw the investigator coming to meet her, it would raise questions she wasn't ready to answer. The royal family had to be very careful about who they met with and why. After waiting a few more seconds, Camilla slowly opened the door. A tall man in a dark coat stepped inside. He was carrying a briefcase and looked nervous. His name was Marcus Thompson, and he had been working as a private investigator for 20 years. He specialized in finding missing items and solving old mysteries. Marcus had been recommended to Camilla by a friend who didn't know the real reason why the Queen needed an investigator. Camilla had told her friend she was looking into the family history for a book project. This wasn't completely a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. The investigator sat down across from Camilla at the reading table. He opened his briefcase and took out a thick folder filled with papers and photographs. His face was serious as he looked at the Queen. The room was so quiet that Camilla could hear her own heartbeat. She knew that what Marcus was about to tell her would change everything. For weeks she had been preparing herself for this moment, but now that it was here, she felt scared and excited at the same time. Marcus cleared his throat and began to speak in a low voice. He told Camilla that he had found the missing inheritance. But the news wasn't good. The inheritance hadn't just disappeared by accident. Someone had deliberately stolen it, and that person was someone very close to the royal family. As Marcus continued talking, Camilla felt her hands getting cold. The story he told was worse than anything she had imagined. Not only had someone stolen from the royal family, but they had been stealing for many years. They had been trusted with important responsibilities, but they had been using their position to take things that didn't belong to them. The Queen realized she was in danger. If the thief found out that she knew the truth, they might try to stop her from exposing them. She needed to be very careful about what she did next. But she also knew she couldn't let this crime continue. Too much had already been stolen, and it was her duty to protect what belonged to the royal family. Marcus finished explaining what he had discovered and handed Camilla a key piece of evidence. It was a photograph that proved who the thief was and where some of the stolen items were hidden. Looking at this photograph, Camilla felt angry and sad at the same time. The person in the picture was someone she had trusted completely. The meeting was almost over when both Camilla and Marcus heard something that made their blood run cold. Heavy footsteps were coming down the hallway toward the library. Multiple sets of footsteps walking in formation like soldiers. These weren't the soft steps of regular palace staff. These were the heavy boots of the royal guard. Camilla's heart started beating faster as the footsteps got louder. She quickly gathered the documents from the table and stuffed them back into her leather bag. Marcus grabbed his briefcase and looked around the room, trying to find another way out. But the library only had one door, and the windows were too high to climb out of. The queen tried to stay calm, but her mind was racing. Who had sent the royal guard to find her? How did they know about her secret meeting? She had been so careful to make sure nobody was watching. She had chosen this time because most of the palace staff would be asleep. The footsteps stopped right outside the library door. Camilla could hear voices talking quietly, but she couldn't understand what they were saying. She looked at Marcus and she could see fear in his eyes. If the guards found him here with the queen in the middle of the night, it would cause a huge scandal. Suddenly, there was loud knocking on the door. A deep voice called out, demanding that the door be opened immediately. The voice belonged to Captain Richards, the head of the royal guard. Camilla knew him well because he had been protecting the royal family for over 15 years. But tonight his voice sounded different. It sounded angry and threatening. Camilla had no choice but to open the door. She couldn't pretend she wasn't there because the guards had already seen light coming from under the door. She walked slowly to the door and turned the handle. As soon as she opened it, Captain Richards and 4 other guards stepped into the room. The captain's eyes moved quickly around the library. He noticed Marcus sitting at the table with his briefcase. He saw the documents that Camilla was still holding in her bag. His expression became even more serious as he realized that something important was happening in this room. Captain Richards had received orders to find the queen and bring her to see someone immediately. He hadn't been told why, but the orders came from very high up in the palace hierarchy. Someone powerful wanted to talk to Camilla urgently, and they had sent the guards to make sure she came. The queen tried to act normal, but it was difficult. She asked Captain Richards why the guards were there and who wanted to see her. But the captain didn't give her a straight answer. He just said that she needed to come with them right away. He also said that Marcus had to come too. This surprised everyone in the room. Why would the guards want to take the private investigator? Marcus hadn't done anything wrong. He was just doing the job that Camilla had hired him to do. But apparently someone knew about their meeting and wanted to question both of them. As they walked through the palace hallways, Camilla's mind was working fast. She was trying to figure out who could have known about her investigation. Only a few people knew that she had hired Marcus. She had been very careful to keep the investigation secret from most of the palace staff. The guards led them to a part of the palace that Camilla rarely visited. It was in the basement where the old storage rooms and security offices were located. The hallways down here were narrow and dimly lit. The walls were made of stone and the air felt cold and damp. They stopped at a heavy metal door that Camilla had never seen before. Captain Richards used a special keycard to open it. Inside was a small room with no windows. There was a table with 2 chairs and a recording device. It looked like an interrogation room. This made Camilla very nervous. Why were they being brought to a place like this? She was the Queen of England. She shouldn't be treated like a criminal, but apparently someone thought she had done something wrong. Someone wanted to question her about her secret investigation. A few minutes later, a man walked into the room. Camilla recognized him immediately and her heart sank. It was Lord Harrison, the royal family's chief financial advisor. He was the person responsible for managing all of the royal family's money and investments. He was also someone that Camilla had trusted completely. But now, looking at his face, Camilla realized something terrible. Lord Harrison wasn't here to help her. He was here because he was involved in the theft of the missing inheritance. He was either the thief himself, or he was working with the person who had been stealing from the royal family. Lord Harrison sat down across from Camilla and Marcus. He had a folder in his hands and his expression was very serious. He looked like a man who had been caught doing something wrong and was now trying to figure out how to get out of trouble. He began speaking in a calm voice, but Camilla could hear the worry underneath. He said that he knew about her investigation and that he knew what Marcus had discovered. He said that she was making a big mistake by trying to expose what she thought was theft. According to Lord Harrison, the missing inheritance wasn't stolen at all. He claimed that it had been moved and hidden for security reasons. He said that there were threats against the royal family, and the valuable items had to be protected by keeping them in secret locations. But Camilla didn't believe him. She had seen the evidence that Marcus had collected. She had read the documents that proved someone had been stealing from the royal family for years. She knew that Lord Harrison was lying to her, but she wasn't sure why. Marcus sat quietly, listening to everything that was being said. He was holding his briefcase tight, knowing that it contained evidence that could prove Lord Harrison was lying. But he was also scared because he was just a private investigator who had gotten caught up in royal family politics. The tension in the room was getting stronger. Camilla realized that this meeting was more dangerous than she had thought. Lord Harrison wasn't just trying to cover up a crime. He was trying to protect himself and possibly other people who were involved in stealing from the royal family. She looked around the room and noticed something that made her even more worried. There were no security cameras here, and the door was locked from the outside. If something happened to her and Marcus in this room, nobody would know about it. They were completely alone with someone who might be a criminal. Lord Harrison continued talking, trying to convince Camilla that she should stop her investigation. He said that if she continued, it would cause a scandal that would hurt the royal family's reputation. He said that some secrets were better left buried, but Camilla had made up her mind. She wasn't going to let anyone steal from her family. No matter how powerful they were, she wasn't going to be scared into keeping quiet about crimes. She was the queen, and it was her duty to protect what belonged to the royal family. Camilla looked directly at Lord Harrison and spoke with confidence. She told him that she knew he was lying, and that she had proof of the theft. She said that no matter what threats he made, she wasn't going to stop her investigation. The royal family deserved to know the truth about their missing inheritance. Lord Harrison's face changed when he heard this. The calm expression disappeared, and Camilla could see anger and fear in his eyes. He realized that the queen wasn't going to be easily scared or convinced to give up. He had hoped that bringing her to the secret room would make her understand how serious the situation was. Marcus decided this was the right time to speak up. He opened his briefcase and took out some of the evidence he had collected. He placed photographs and documents on the table in front of Lord Harrison. The evidence clearly showed that money and valuable items had been moved from royal accounts to private accounts over several years. One of the photographs showed Lord Harrison meeting with people who weren't supposed to have access to royal family information. Another document showed bank transfers that had been hidden from the official royal financial records. There was even a recording of a phone conversation where Lord Harrison talked about moving royal assets to safe places where nobody could find them. Looking at this evidence, Lord Harrison knew that his lies weren't working anymore. He sat back in his chair and was quiet for a long time. Camilla could see that he was thinking about what to do next. She could tell that he was deciding whether to continue lying or to finally tell the truth. After several minutes of silence, Lord Harrison began to speak again. But this time his voice was different. He sounded tired and defeated. He said that he hadn't wanted things to go this far. He said that what started as a small problem had grown into something much bigger and more dangerous. He explained that the theft of the royal inheritance had been going on for over 20 years. It hadn't started with him, but he had become involved when he discovered what was happening. Instead of reporting the crime, he had decided to join the thieves because they had threatened to hurt his family. The real leader of the theft operation was someone that neither Camilla nor Marcus had suspected. It was Sir Edmund Blackwood, the former royal treasurer who had retired 5 years ago. Sir Edmund had been trusted by the royal family for over 30 years, and nobody had ever questioned his loyalty. Sir Edmund had been stealing small amounts of money and valuable items for years. He was very clever about it, only taking things that wouldn't be missed right away. He had also been very careful to hide the thefts by changing the official records and creating fake documents. But as the years went by, Sir Edmund became greedy. He started taking larger amounts and more valuable items. He also started involving other people in his criminal operation. He needed help to move the stolen items and to hide the money in foreign bank accounts. Lord Harrison had discovered the theft by accident 3 years ago when he was reviewing old financial records. When he confronted Sir Edmund about it, the former treasurer had threatened to frame him for the crimes. Sir Edmund said he had created evidence that would make it look like Lord Harrison was the real thief. Scared for his reputation and his family's safety, Lord Harrison had agreed to help cover up the thefts. He had used his position as chief financial advisor to change records and create false reports. He had also helped Sir Edmund identify the most valuable items that could be stolen without being noticed quickly. The missing inheritance that Camilla had been investigating was just one part of a much larger criminal operation. Over the years, millions of pounds worth of money, jewelry, artwork, and historical artifacts had been stolen from the royal family. Most of these items had been sold to private collectors around the world. Marcus asked Lord Harrison where Sir Edmund was now and whether he was still stealing from the royal family. Lord Harrison said that Sir Edmund had left England 6 months ago and was living in a country that didn't have an agreement to send criminals back to Britain. He was still controlling the criminal operation from his new home, using people like Lord Harrison to continue the thefts. Camilla felt sick when she heard this. Not only had someone been stealing from her family for decades, but the thief had escaped to another country where he couldn't be arrested. All the money and valuable items that had been stolen might never be recovered. But Marcus had some good news. He said that his investigation had found the location of a secret warehouse where many of the stolen items were being stored. The warehouse was in London, and it was being guarded by people who worked for Sir Edmund. If they could get the police to search the warehouse, they might be able to recover some of the stolen royal property. Lord Harrison looked worried when he heard about the warehouse. He said that Sir Edmund had told him the warehouse was just a temporary storage place. He said that most of the items stored there were supposed to be moved to other countries within the next few weeks. This meant that Camilla and Marcus had to act fast. If they waited too long, the stolen items would disappear forever. They needed to contact the police immediately and get them to search the warehouse before Sir Edmund's people could move everything. But there was a problem. Lord Harrison said that Sir Edmund had people working inside the police department who would warn him if an investigation was started. He said that several police officers had been paid to protect Sir Edmund's criminal operation. If they went to the wrong police officers, Sir Edmund would find out and move all the stolen items before they could be recovered. Camilla realized that this situation was more complicated than she had thought. It wasn't just about theft. It was about corruption that reached into many parts of the government and police force. Sir Edmund had spent years building a network of people who would help him and protect him from being caught. Marcus suggested that they contact a special police unit that investigated corruption and organized crime. These officers worked in secret and couldn't be easily bribed or threatened. But even this would be risky because they didn't know how far Sir Edmund's influence reached. The Queen made a decision. She said that she was willing to take the risk because the royal family couldn't let these crimes continue. She said that even if it caused a scandal, it was better to expose the truth than to let criminals keep stealing from the people of Britain. But as they were making plans for what to do next, they heard something that made everyone in the room freeze with fear. There were footsteps in the hallway outside, and someone was trying to open the locked door. Someone else had come to the secret room, and they didn't know if this person was there to help them or to stop them from exposing the truth. The door opened slowly, and everyone in the room held their breath. Captain Richards walked in, followed by 2 other guards that Camilla didn't recognize. These guards looked different from the regular royal guard. They were wearing plain clothes instead of uniforms, and they had serious expressions on their faces. Captain Richards looked around the room and saw the documents spread on the table. He saw the fear in everyone's faces and realized that something very important had been happening in this secret meeting. He walked over to the table and picked up one of the photographs that Marcus had shown to Lord Harrison. Lord Harrison stood up quickly and tried to explain what was happening. He said that the Queen had been conducting an unauthorized investigation and that she had hired a private investigator without permission. He said that this was causing problems for the security of the royal family, but Captain Richards didn't seem to be listening to Lord Harrison's explanation. Instead, he was studying the evidence that was on the table. He picked up document after document, reading them carefully. His expression became more serious as he realized what these papers proved. After several minutes, Captain Richards looked up at everyone in the room. He said that he had been investigating suspicious activities in the palace for several months. He said that he had noticed money and valuable items going missing, but he hadn't been able to figure out who was responsible. The two guards who had come with Captain Richards were actually special investigators from Scotland Yard. They had been working undercover in the palace, pretending to be regular security guards while they investigated the thefts. They had been watching several people, including Lord Harrison, for weeks. Camilla felt relieved when she heard this. She realized that Captain Richards wasn't working with the criminals. He was actually trying to catch them. She had been right to trust him all these years. He was one of the few people in the palace who was completely honest. Captain Richards explained that the police had been building a case against the theft ring for months. They knew about Sir Edmund and his criminal operation, but they needed more evidence before they could make arrests. They had been waiting for someone inside the operation to make a mistake that would give them the proof they needed. Lord Harrison's face went white when he heard this. He realized that the police had been watching him, and that they probably knew about his involvement in the thefts. He had thought he was being careful, but apparently the investigators had been following his activities for a long time. One of the undercover investigators stepped forward and began asking Lord Harrison questions about his relationship with Sir Edmund. He asked about the bank accounts, the secret meetings, and the warehouse where stolen items were being stored. Lord Harrison tried to claim that he was innocent, but the evidence against him was too strong. Marcus showed the investigators all the evidence he had collected during his investigation for Queen Camilla. The photographs, documents, and recordings painted a clear picture of how the theft operation worked. They showed how Sir Edmund had been stealing from the royal family for years and how he had convinced other people to help him. The investigators were very interested in the information about the warehouse in London. They said that they had been trying to find where Sir Edmund was storing the stolen items, but they hadn't been able to locate it. With Marcus's information, they could finally raid the warehouse and recover the royal property. But there was still a problem. Lord Harrison warned them that Sir Edmund had people watching the warehouse all the time. If the police tried to raid it during the day, the guards would have time to move the stolen items before the police could get inside. They needed to plan the raid very carefully. Captain Richards suggested that they conduct the raid at night when there would be fewer guards at the warehouse. He said that his team could work with the Scotland Yard investigators to surround the building and make sure nobody escaped with the stolen items. Queen Camilla asked if she could be present during the raid. She wanted to see the stolen royal property being recovered with her own eyes. She had been working so hard to find the truth about the missing inheritance, and she wanted to be there when justice was finally served. The investigators said that it would be too dangerous for the Queen to be at the warehouse during the raid. There might be violence if Sir Edmund's people tried to resist arrest, but they agreed to let her watch the raid from a safe distance using special cameras that the police would set up. As they were making plans for the warehouse raid, Lord Harrison suddenly became very cooperative. He offered to help the police by giving them information about Sir Edmund's operation. He said he knew the names of other people who were involved in the thefts, and the locations of other places where stolen items might be hidden. The investigators were suspicious of Lord Harrison's sudden willingness to help. They wondered if he was trying to make a deal to reduce his punishment for his crimes. But they also knew that his information could be very valuable for catching other criminals and recovering more stolen property. Captain Richards made it clear that Lord Harrison was under arrest for his involvement in the theft ring. He said that any cooperation with the investigation might be considered when Lord Harrison went to court, but it wouldn't excuse him from facing punishment for his crimes. Marcus was praised by the investigators for the excellent work he had done on his investigation. They said that without his evidence, they might never have been able to build a strong enough case against the theft ring. They asked him to continue working with them as they expanded their investigation to catch other criminals. As the meeting in the secret room came to an end, Camilla felt a mixture of emotions. She was happy that the truth was finally coming out and that the criminals would be caught. But she was also sad that people she had trusted had been stealing from her family for so many years. The investigators explained that the warehouse raid would happen in 2 days. They needed time to plan the operation carefully and to make sure they had enough officers to surround the building. They also wanted to coordinate with international police agencies to try to catch Sir Edmund in the country where he was hiding. Lord Harrison was taken away by the police to be formally charged with his crimes. As he was leaving, he looked back at Queen Camilla and said he was sorry for betraying her trust. He said that he had been scared and had made bad decisions, but he knew that wasn't an excuse for stealing from the royal family. Camilla and Marcus were escorted back to the main part of the palace by Captain Richards. The Queen felt exhausted after everything that had happened, but she also felt proud that she had stood up for what was right. She had refused to let criminals continue stealing from her family, even when it was dangerous to investigate them. As they walked through the palace hallways, Captain Richards told Camilla that there might be more surprises in the coming days. He said that the investigation was likely to uncover other crimes and other people who had been involved in corruption. The theft of the royal inheritance was just the beginning of a much larger criminal conspiracy. 2 days later, Queen Camilla found herself sitting in an unmarked police van parked 3 blocks away from the warehouse. It was just past midnight, and the streets of London were quiet except for the occasional car passing by. Through the van's special cameras, she could see the warehouse building where her family's stolen treasures had been hidden for years. The warehouse looked ordinary from the outside. It was a large gray building in an industrial area of London. There were no signs indicating what was stored inside, and only a few small windows near the roof. To anyone passing by, it would look like any other storage building in the area, but Camilla knew that inside this building were millions of pounds worth of items that belonged to the royal family. There were paintings that had hung in royal palaces for centuries, jewelry that had been worn by queens and princesses, and historical artifacts that were priceless pieces of British heritage. Captain Richards was coordinating the raid from the van next to Camilla's. He was in constant communication with the teams of police officers who had surrounded the warehouse. There were over 30 officers involved in the operation, including specialists who were trained to handle valuable artwork and historical items. Marcus was also watching the raid from one of the police vans. He had been working with the investigators for the past 2 days, helping them understand the layout of the warehouse and the security systems that Sir Edmund's people had installed. His knowledge was crucial for making sure the raid was successful. At exactly 12:30 in the morning, Captain Richards gave the signal for the raid to begin. Police officers moved quickly and quietly toward the warehouse from all directions. They had practiced this operation several times to make sure everything would go smoothly. The warehouse had 4 guards watching it during the night shift. These guards were not expecting a police raid, because they thought Sir Edmund's network would warn them if there was any danger. They were caught completely by surprise when police officers surrounded the building. 2 of the guards tried to run away when they saw the police, but they were quickly caught by officers who had been waiting in the shadows. The other 2 guards surrendered immediately when they realized they were outnumbered and had nowhere to escape. Getting inside the warehouse was more difficult than the police had expected. Sir Edmund's people had installed several locks and security systems to protect the stolen items. It took the police technical team almost 20 minutes to get through all the security barriers and open the main doors. When the warehouse doors finally opened, the police officers couldn't believe what they saw inside. The building was filled with rows and rows of valuable items, all carefully stored and organized. There were paintings covered with protective cloth, jewelry displayed in glass cases, and furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. Captain Richards radioed to Queen Camilla that the raid was successful, and that the warehouse contained more stolen items than anyone had expected. He said that it would take hours just to count everything that was stored inside. Many of the items had labels showing which royal palace they had been taken from and when they had been stolen. Some of the stolen items were things that Camilla remembered from her childhood. There was a painting that used to hang in the dining room of one of the royal estates. There was a set of silver dishes that had been used for special royal dinners. There was even a small crown that had belonged to one of her relatives who had died many years ago. The police photographers began taking pictures of everything in the warehouse to create evidence for the criminal trial. Each item had to be carefully documented to prove that it had been stolen from the royal family. This process would take several days to complete. While the police were working inside the warehouse, the arrested guards were being questioned about their involvement in the theft ring. One of the guards agreed to cooperate with the investigation in exchange for a lighter punishment. He provided information about other warehouses and storage locations where stolen items might be hidden. The cooperative guard also revealed that Sir Edmund had been planning to move all the items from this warehouse within the next week. If Queen Camilla hadn't started her investigation when she did, all of these valuable items would have disappeared forever. They would have been sold to private collectors in other countries where they could never be recovered. Captain Richards came to Camilla's van to give her a personal update on what they had found. He said that the preliminary count showed over 200 stolen items, with a total value of more than £50 million. But he warned her that this was probably just one of several storage locations that Sir Edmund had been using. The investigation team had also found computers and documents in the warehouse office that contained information about Sir Edmund's entire criminal operation. These records showed bank account numbers, the names of people who had bought stolen items, and the locations of other storage facilities. One of the most shocking discoveries was a detailed list of royal family members and their personal schedules. Sir Edmund had been having people spy on the royal family to find out when palaces would be empty, so that items could be stolen without being noticed. This meant that the theft operation was much more organized and sophisticated than anyone had realized, though our documents also revealed that Sir Edmund had been planning to steal several more valuable items before he left England permanently. He had been targeting specific paintings and jewelry pieces that would be worth millions of pounds on the illegal art market. The raid had stopped these thefts from happening. As dawn broke over London, the police were still working to remove all the stolen items from the warehouse. Special trucks were brought in to transport the valuable items safely back to royal properties. Each item was wrapped carefully and escorted by armed guards to make sure nothing was damaged or lost during transport. Queen Camilla was finally allowed to enter the warehouse to see the recovered items in person. Walking through the rows of stolen royal property, she felt both angry and sad. She was angry that people she had trusted had been stealing from her family for so many years. But she was also sad to see how much of her family's heritage had been taken from them. Some of the stolen items had special personal meaning for Camilla. There was a necklace that had belonged to her grandmother, which she thought had been lost forever. There was a set of books that contained handwritten notes from previous kings and queens. These items weren't just valuable because of their price, but because they connected her to her family's history. The warehouse raid was a huge success, but Captain Richards reminded Camilla that their work wasn't finished yet. They still needed to catch Sir Edmund and the other people who were involved in the theft ring. They also needed to search for other storage locations where more stolen items might be hidden. The information found in the warehouse computers would help the police track down Sir Edmund's international criminal network. But this would take time and cooperation from police agencies in other countries. Sir Edmund had been very clever about hiding his crimes, and it would be challenging to bring him to justice. As Camilla left the warehouse and returned to Buckingham Palace, she knew that this was just the beginning of a long process to recover everything that had been stolen from the royal family. But she felt proud that she had taken action to expose the truth, even when it was difficult and dangerous to do so. 3 weeks after the warehouse raid, Queen Camilla received an urgent phone call from Captain Richards. He had news about Sir Edmund Blackwood that would change everything about their investigation. The international police cooperation that they had been hoping for was finally producing results. Sir Edmund had been found living in Monaco, a small country on the Mediterranean Sea that was famous for being a safe place for wealthy people who wanted to avoid taxes and legal problems. He had been using a false identity and living in a luxury apartment overlooking the ocean. He thought he was safe because Monaco had complicated laws about sending criminals back to other countries, but the police had discovered something that Sir Edmund didn't know about. Some of the stolen royal items that he had sold to private collectors were actually protected by international heritage laws. This meant that stealing them wasn't just a crime in Britain, but was also illegal under international law. Countries around the world were required to help catch people who stole important cultural artifacts. The breakthrough came when one of the buyers of stolen royal jewelry tried to sell a diamond necklace at an auction house in Paris. The auction house experts recognized the necklace as a piece that had been reported stolen from the British royal family. When they contacted the police, it started a chain of investigations that led back to Sir Edmund. Captain Richards explained to Camilla that the French police had been very helpful in tracking down the stolen items that Sir Edmund had sold in France. They had also shared information with police in other European countries where royal artifacts had been sold. This international cooperation was making it much easier to build a strong case against Sir Edmund. The Monaco police had been watching Sir Edmund for several days before they arrested him. They discovered that he was still actively involved in criminal activities, even though he was supposed to be retired and living quietly. He had been using his apartment as a base for organizing art thefts in other countries. When the police searched Sir Edmund's apartment, they found evidence that shocked everyone involved in the investigation. He had been keeping detailed records of every theft he had organized over the past 30 years. These records included photographs of stolen items, the names of buyers, and the amounts of money he had received for each sale. Most surprising of all, the records showed that Sir Edmund had been planning one final, massive theft before disappearing permanently. He wanted to steal the crown jewels themselves during a time when they would be moved for a special royal ceremony. This would have been the biggest theft in British history, worth hundreds of millions of pounds. The plan to steal the crown jewels was incredibly detailed and sophisticated. Sir Edmund had recruited people inside the security company that protected the jewels during transport. He had also bribed officials who would be responsible for planning the route that the jewels would take from the Tower of London to the ceremony location. Reading about this planned theft made Camilla feel sick. The crown jewels weren't just valuable objects. They were symbols of British history and tradition that belonged to all the people of Britain, not just the royal family. If Sir Edmund had succeeded in stealing them, it would have been a disaster for the entire country. Captain Richards told Camilla that Sir Edmund's arrest had led to the discovery of more storage locations where stolen items were hidden. The police had found warehouses in Germany, Switzerland, and Belgium that contained royal artifacts that had been stolen over many years. International teams of investigators were working together to recover all of these items. One of the most important discoveries was a secret vault in a Swiss bank that contained some of the most valuable items that Sir Edmund had stolen. This vault had been rented under a false name, and it contained jewelry, gold artifacts, and historical documents that were worth tens of millions of pounds. The Swiss bank had been suspicious about the person who rented the vault because he always paid in cash and never provided proper identification. But they hadn't reported their suspicions to the police because Switzerland had strict laws about protecting the privacy of bank customers. It was only after Sir Edmund was arrested that they agreed to help with the investigation. Marcus had been working with international investigators to identify all of the stolen items that were being recovered from different countries. His expertise in art and historical artifacts was helping the police understand the true value of what had been stolen from the royal family over the years. The total value of recovered items was now estimated to be over £200 million. This made Sir Edmund's theft ring one of the largest art theft operations in European history. The case was attracting attention from newspapers and television stations around the world, but there were still challenges in bringing Sir Edmund to justice. His lawyers were arguing that he couldn't be sent back to Britain because too much time had passed since some of the thefts occurred. They were also claiming that he was too old and sick to survive a trial and imprisonment. The British government was working with Monaco's government to make sure that Sir Edmund would face trial for his crimes. The Prime Minister had personally called Monaco's leaders to ask for their cooperation in sending Sir Edmund back to Britain. This was becoming a diplomatic issue between the two countries. Queen Camilla was invited to testify about the impact that the thefts had on the royal family and the British people. She would need to explain how the stolen items were important for British culture and history, not just because of their financial value. Her testimony could be crucial for convincing the court that Sir Edmund should be punished severely for his crimes. The investigation had also uncovered corruption in several other institutions that were supposed to protect British cultural heritage. Some museum directors, auction house experts, and private art dealers had been helping Sir Edmund by providing false certificates for stolen items or by not asking questions about where valuable artifacts came from. Captain Richards warned Camilla that there might be more arrests in the coming weeks as the investigation continued to expand. The corruption network that Sir Edmund had built was much larger than anyone had initially realized. It included people in many different countries who had been helping him steal and sell cultural artifacts for decades. The media attention surrounding the case was becoming a problem for the royal family. Reporters were asking difficult questions about how the thefts had been allowed to continue for so many years without being detected. Some people were criticizing the royal family for not having better security systems to protect their valuable possessions. Camilla knew that she would need to address these criticisms publicly. She would need to explain how the royal family was improving their security procedures to prevent future thefts. She would also need to thank the police and international investigators who had worked so hard to recover the stolen items. As the international manhunt for Sir Edmund's accomplices continued, Camilla reflected on how much her life had changed since she first discovered the missing inheritance documents. What had started as a small investigation into some missing family items had turned into an international criminal case that was making headlines around the world. She was proud that she had taken action to expose the truth, even when it was difficult and dangerous. But she also realized that the effects of Sir Edmund's crimes would continue to impact the royal family and British cultural institutions for years to come. 6 months after Sir Edmund's arrest in Monaco, Queen Camilla stood in the restored royal gallery at Buckingham Palace, looking at the recovered artifacts that had finally been returned to their rightful place. The investigation that had started with her midnight meeting in the library had transformed into one of the most successful art recovery operations in British history. Sir Edmund had been extradited to Britain and was now facing trial for his crimes. The evidence against him was overwhelming, with detailed records of 30 years of theft, fraud, and corruption. His own meticulous documentation of his criminal activities had become the prosecution's most powerful weapon in court. The trial had revealed shocking details about the extent of Sir Edmund's criminal network. Over 40 people in 12 different countries had been arrested for their involvement in stealing, selling, or hiding royal artifacts. The network included museum curators, art dealers, security guards, bank officials, and even some government employees who had been bribed to ignore suspicious activities. Lord Harrison had cooperated fully with the investigation and had received a reduced sentence in exchange for his testimony against Sir Edmund. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, but would be eligible for early release if he continued to help recover stolen items. His cooperation had been essential for understanding how the theft operation worked and for locating hidden storage facilities. The financial impact of the recovered items was staggering. The total value of returned royal property was now estimated at over £300 million. This included not just paintings and jewelry, but also historical documents, furniture, weapons, and artifacts that told the story of British royal history over several centuries. Some of the most precious recovered items had special significance for the royal family. Queen Camilla was particularly moved by the return of a diary written by Queen Victoria, which contained personal thoughts about major historical events. There was also a collection of letters between King George VI and Queen Elizabeth during World War II that provided unique insights into how the royal family dealt with the challenges of wartime. The recovery process had been complicated because many of the stolen items had been sold to innocent buyers who didn't know they were purchasing stolen property. The courts had to decide whether these buyers should be compensated for their losses or whether they should simply return the items without payment. In most cases, the courts ruled that the items should be returned to the royal family without compensation to the buyers. The judges explained that stolen property always remained stolen, regardless of whether the current owner knew about the theft. However, the British government established a special fund to provide some compensation to buyers who could prove they had purchased items in good faith. Marcus had become something of a celebrity because of his role in exposing the theft ring. He had been hired by several other royal families and wealthy collectors to investigate suspicious activities involving their valuable possessions. His success in the Sir Edmund case had established him as one of Europe's leading experts in art theft investigation. Captain Richards had been promoted to head of royal security and was implementing new procedures to prevent future thefts. All royal properties now had upgraded security systems, and there were new rules about who could access valuable items and how they should be transported. Every item in the royal collection was being photographed and documented in a secure digital database. The international cooperation that had made the investigation successful was continuing in other cases. Police agencies in different countries were sharing information about art theft and cultural heritage crimes more effectively than ever before. The Sir Edmund case had shown how criminals could operate across national borders, and law enforcement was adapting to meet this challenge. Queen Camilla had testified at Sir Edmund's trial, describing the emotional impact that the thefts had on the royal family and the British people. She explained that the stolen items weren't just valuable objects, but were part of Britain's cultural heritage that belonged to all citizens. Her testimony had been moving and had helped the jury understand why Sir Edmund's crimes were so serious. The media coverage of the case had been intense, but mostly positive. The public admired Queen Camilla for taking personal action to investigate the thefts, even when it put her in danger. Opinion polls showed that most British people felt proud that their queen had stood up to criminals and had worked to protect their cultural heritage. However, the case had also led to difficult questions about security and oversight at royal properties. Some critics argued that the thefts could have been prevented if there had been better inventory management and more frequent audits of valuable items. The royal family had responded by implementing new transparency measures and allowing independent experts to review their security procedures. The trial had also exposed corruption in several cultural institutions beyond the royal family. Museums, auction houses, and art galleries were implementing new policies to verify the ownership history of valuable items before accepting them for display or sale. The art world was becoming more careful about dealing with potentially stolen cultural artifacts. Sir Edmund's sentencing hearing was scheduled for the following month. The prosecution was asking for a 30-year prison sentence, which would effectively be a life sentence given Sir Edmund's age. His defense lawyers were arguing for a shorter sentence because of his cooperation in recovering stolen items and his advanced age and poor health. Queen Camilla felt that justice was finally being served, but she also knew that the effects of Sir Edmund's crimes would continue for many years. Some stolen items had been destroyed or lost forever, and some buyers who had purchased stolen artifacts might never be found. The investigation had shown how easy it was for criminals to exploit weaknesses in the international art market. The restored royal gallery where Camilla now stood had become a symbol of justice and recovery. Visitors could see many of the returned artifacts displayed alongside information about how they had been stolen and recovered. The exhibition was helping to educate the public about the importance of protecting cultural heritage from criminals. Looking at the recovered items, Camilla thought about how different things might have been if she hadn't decided to investigate the missing inheritance. If she had accepted Lord Harrison's explanations and stopped asking questions, Sir Edmund's criminal operation might have continued for many more years. The crown jewels might have been stolen, and hundreds of millions of pounds worth of cultural artifacts might have been lost forever. The experience had taught her the importance of questioning authority and standing up for what was right, even when it was difficult or dangerous. She had learned that people in positions of trust could sometimes abuse that trust, and that it was everyone's responsibility to watch for corruption and criminal activity. As she walked through the gallery, surrounded by the treasures that had been returned to their rightful place, Queen Camilla felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had protected her family's heritage and had helped to preserve important pieces of British history for future generations. The investigation that had started in a secret midnight meeting had ended with justice being served and valuable cultural artifacts being saved from criminals. The case had shown that even the most sophisticated criminal operations could be defeated when honest people worked together to uncover the truth. It had also demonstrated the importance of international cooperation in fighting crimes that crossed national borders. Most importantly, it had proven that standing up for justice was always worth the effort, no matter how difficult or dangerous the journey might be.